Okay, so I want to start today with a scenario. It's a bit of a thought experiment, but I really want you to try and feel the weight of it.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine you have a neighbor. You've lived next to them for, I don't know, 20 years. You do the whole backyard barbecue thing. You've watched the kids grow up. You compare notes on, retirement planning.
Sounds pretty classic, the suburban dream almost.
Exactly. You trust this person and you trust the path you're both on. So you both decide to invest your life savings into the exact same fund.
The very same one.
Identical. Same amount of money, same glossy brochure. You've got the same fund manager promising you both a secure future. You are, for all intents and purposes, in the same boat.
And given what we're talking about today, I have a feeling this boat is about to hit an iceberg.
Oh, it hits the iceberg, it sinks, and it just dissolves. The whole investment turns out to be a massive, sophisticated fraud. All the money is just gone. You and your neighbor are standing there completely wiped out. But then the government steps in. The black cars roll up, they assess the damage, and they hand your neighbor a check. A big one.
For the full amount.
For the full amount. They say, "We're terribly sorry this happened. Here is full reimbursement for your loss."
What a relief. For the neighbor, I mean.
Huge. They're made whole, the retirement is saved. Then the government official, he turns to you, looks down at his clipboard, and just says, "Sorry, you get absolutely nothing."
Zero.
Zero. The exact same crime, the exact same financial loss, but because of some, I don't know, piece of administrative paperwork that you probably didn't even know existed, you are left completely in the cold.
That's a terrifying it sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, but this is.
Yeah.
This is the real fallout from the Trio Capital collapse, isn't it?
It is. But here's the twist for our deep dive today. We're not here to relitigate the fraud itself. We're not trying to be detectives and figure out where the money went back in 2009.
No, we're looking at something happening right now.
Today, in fact.
Specifically today, we're analyzing a formal submission dated today, Thursday, February 5, 2026.
It's hot off the press.
It is. It was written by John Telford on behalf of victims of financial crime, and it's addressed to the Secretary of the Attorney General's Department in Canberra. And it levels this just massive accusation.
But not against the fraudsters, right? We all know they're guilty.
No, not against them.
Yeah.
This accusation is aimed squarely at the Commonwealth government itself.
And the term they use, it's maladministration by omission, which, I have to be honest, sounds like the kind of phrase that would put most people to sleep.
It does, but when you actually unpack it, it's dynamite.
Right.
It's the argument that the government's silence, or what they didn't say, the warnings they failed to give, was, in its own way, just as destructive as the fraud itself.
So here's our roadmap for this. First, we're going to explore this tale of two victims to understand how that split even happened. Then we're going to uncover what the document calls a regulatory secret that the government apparently knew for years. And then we're going to really define this concept of maladministration and see why this is an ethical argument, not just a legal one.
And it all leads to this fundamental question about trust, really. If the referee sees a player walking into a trap on the field and doesn't blow the whistle, is the ref, partially to blame for what happens next?
That is the question. So let's go back to the scene of the crime. Trio Capital, for anyone listening who hasn't thought about this since 2009, give us the quick rundown.
So Trio Capital was the largest superannuation fraud in Australian history. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars vanished, funneled into these complex offshore havens, a classic messy collapse.
But the controversy today isn't about the theft.
No, it's about the cleanup. And this is where we get back to your neighbor scenario. Group A and Group B.
Right.
Correct. The victims were split into two very distinct classes. Group A were people who were invested in what are called APRA-regulated superannuation funds.
APRA being the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority.
Exactly. They're the heavy hitters of financial regulation. And because these investors were in those specific funds, they had access to a legislative safety net.
A literal safety net written into the law.
Yes. It's called Part 23 of the Superannuation Industry Supervision Act. It's a provision that allows the minister to grant financial assistance if a fund suffers a loss because of fraud. So, Group A, your neighbor, they got compensated.
They got their money back.
Yep. Around $55 million was paid out to make them whole.
Okay, so the system worked for them. Now tell us about Group B, the people left with nothing.
Group B were investors in self-managed super funds, or SMSFs, or people who had invested directly. And because they were technically managing themselves, They fell outside of that APRA safety net.
So no Part 23 for them, no compensation.
Exactly. Total loss.
No, I can almost hear a skeptic listening to this, maybe a staunch free market advocate yelling at their phone right now, saying, well, hold on, that's the deal, isn't it? You choose a self-managed fund, you take on the risk. You can't then ask for a bailout when your bet goes bad.
That is the standard defense. Buyer beware. If you choose to walk into the Wild West, you can't be surprised when you run into bandits.
It seems logical on the surface.
It does. But this is where the submission from John Telford just throws a massive wrench into that whole line of thinking. Because it turns out a lot of these victims didn't just choose the Wild West.
What do you mean?
They were moved there.
Moved there by who?
By the regulators. The submission points to this critical period, around 2004. APRA took a whole group of funds, they were called small APRA funds, and they basically handed them over to the Australian Tax Office, the ATO, to regulate instead.
So they just passed the files across the desk, like, here, these are your problem now?
Pretty much. It was a regulatory shuffle. But here is the critical failure that the letter points to. When APRA moved these people from their patch to the ATO's patch, they didn't say, hey, just so you know, you are now leaving the safety zone.
They didn't mention that the Part 23 fraud compensation, it doesn't exist over in the ATO's world.
Not a word. Complete silence. The submission claims APRA failed to warn the trustees, failed to warn the members that this simple administrative transfer was stripping them of their fraud protection.
Wow. That completely changes the buyer beware argument.
It demolishes it.
It's not like they signed a waiver saying, I hate safety nets, please get rid of mine.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you buy a car and it comes with airbags. You take it in for a standard mandated service. The mechanic takes the airbags out because of some new internal policy, doesn't tell you, and just hands you back the key.
And then you get in a crash.
And then you crash. That's the core of the grievance here. It wasn't some reckless choice by investors. It was a legislative distinction, a line drawn in a back office in Canberra that had catastrophic consequences for real people.
This brings us to a really interesting phrase in the document. It's called regulatory knowledge asymmetry.
It's a bit of a mouthful.
It sounds like something you'd need a PhD to understand, but I get the feeling it's actually pretty simple.
It is, yeah. In economics, asymmetry just means one side in a deal knows a lot more than the other. In a used car sale, the seller knows the engine's about to fall out. The buyer just sees a shiny new paint job. That's asymmetry.
And in this case, the seller, with all the secret knowledge, is the government regulator.
Correct. The submission argues that the regulators, ASIC and APRA, were sitting on a pile of crucial information that the average consumer could not possibly have known.
So let's list it out. What was this secret knowledge?
Okay, the submission lists 3 key things they knew. First, they knew that the statutory fraud compensation, that Part 23 check, applied only to APRA funds. That was a hard line in the sand.
Okay, so they knew exactly where the border was?
Second, they knew that because of that, SMSF investors were exposed to total loss. They knew there was no backstop for those people. Zero.
And the third thing?
This is the big one. They knew that large-scale fraud was a foreseeable risk.
So not just a theoretical possibility. They knew this kind of thing happens.
Right. It wasn't like an asteroid strike. Financial fraud is a known hazard. So they knew the risk was real, they knew the safety net had a massive hole in it, and they knew exactly which group of people was standing right over that hole.
And on the other side of that asymmetry, what did the consumers know?
Well, according to Telford's submission, this massive exposure was not reasonably apparent to consumers.
Not reasonably apparent. I mean, that's such a polite, bureaucratic way of saying, how on earth are we supposed to figure that out?
It is. Think about it. When you invest in something, maybe you read the prospectus. You look at past returns, check the fees.
Sure.
But do you check which specific act of Parliament from 1993 regulates your fund, and whether Section 23 of that act still applies to your specific subcategory of investment after an administrative transfer that happened in 2004?
I don't even know what act regulates my toaster. Nobody does that.
Nobody does. And that's the point. The submission argues consumers were all operating under a false assumption of equal regulatory protection.
That phrase really hits home. You just assume that if you're participating in the financial system in a country like Australia, that the police lines are drawn around everyone equally. You assume the system is a uniform shield.
But this document argues that the regulators knew the shield was full of gaps, and they watched people walk right through them and said nothing.
Which brings us right to the main accusation. Maladministration. We touched on this, but usually when I hear admin error, I think of someone losing a form. Telford is arguing for something much, much deeper here.
He is. He's making a profound ethical argument. The submission states it very clearly. Maladministration is not limited to unlawful acts.
Whoa, hang on, let's pause there. So you can follow the law perfectly, to the letter, and still be guilty of maladministration.
That's the argument. You can be legally correct, but administratively or ethically wrong. Lawful, but unfair. The letter actually breaks this down to 4 pillars of maladministration. I think we should walk through them.
Okay, let's do it. What's the first pillar?
The first is failure to act where action is reasonably required.
So basically, sitting on your hands when you should have been doing something.
Exactly. If you see a clear danger and it's your job to manage the system, choosing to do nothing is still a choice. And, they argue, a negligent one.
Okay. What's pillar number 2?
Reliance on technical distinctions divorced from substantive fairness.
Divorce from substantive fairness. That is such a powerful phrase. It feels like the classic form over substance argument.
That's precisely what it is. It's the bureaucrats saying, well, technically, according to Section 4, subsection B, paragraph C, you're not covered. While completely ignoring the larger reality that you are an innocent victim of a crime, it's hiding behind the rulebook to avoid doing what's right.
The difference between following the rules and serving the public, what's the third pillar?
This is the one we've been circling this whole time. Silence where disclosure is necessary to avoid foreseeable harm.
The warning sign argument.
Yes. If you know the bridge is out up ahead, you have a duty to put up a sign. You can't just sit back and say, well, the original map from 1993 shows the road ends, if only they'd look closer.
Especially if you're the one who redrew the map in the first place.
Precisely. And the fourth pillar kind of sums it all up. Conduct that undermines confidence in public administration.
So it's not just about these specific victims. It's about the damage to the reputation of the entire system.
It is. The argument is that these victims were, and this is another great phrase, retrospectively disadvantaged.
Retrospectively disadvantaged. Break that down for us.
It means they were punished after the crime happened, based on rules they were never told about before it happened. They played the game, they lost everything, and only then were they told, oh, by the way, you were playing with a different rule book the whole time.
And the submission's argument is that this happened because regulatory form was prioritized over substantive justice.
That's the line. It was administratively tidy to move those funds to the ATO. It kept the legislation clean. It was convenient for the government. But that convenience came at a devastating cost to its citizens.
This all comes back to trust, doesn't it? I mean, why do we even have these agencies? Why do we have an ASIC or an APRA? It's not just to give jobs to lawyers.
No. And the document itself outlines their statutory purpose. They exist to protect consumers, to promote informed participation, and, crucially, to maintain confidence and integrity in the financial markets.
Informed participation. That feels like the key phrase right there. If I don't know my safety net has been taken away, I am not informed, am I?
You're flying blind. And that is the absolute crux of the submission's argument. You cannot have informed participation if the most critical risks are hidden in legislative silence.
It creates this impossible paradox. The agency says its job is to promote informed participation, but then it says, oh, we can't inform you about that giant trap over there because, you see, it's not technically our department anymore.
It's like a doctor watching a patient take the wrong medicine and saying, well, I'm not their primary physician anymore, so it's not my place to say anything.
And then when the patient gets sick, the doctor just points to a 20-year-old medical textbook and says, they should have read this. It was all in the literature.
That's incredibly cold.
Yeah.
And the bigger picture risk here is the erosion of what the submission calls regulatory neutrality.
Regulatory neutrality. That sounds like a concept we should probably define.
It's the core belief that the government doesn't pick winners and losers based on secret rules, that the system is neutral. If the public starts to believe that the game is actually rigged, that some people get bailed out and others don't based on a technicality hidden in a Canberra filing cabinet, then public confidence just collapses.
If I feel like the system is arbitrary, I stop trusting the system.
Exactly. And once that trust is gone, the financial markets themselves lose their integrity. People either pull out altogether or they start cutting corners themselves because they feel like the social contract has been broken.
So, okay. We have the history of the fraud, the accusation of maladministration, the ethical argument for why the silence was so wrong. The big question now is, what does John Telford actually want? Is this just a letter demanding a check?
You think so, but the letter frames it really differently. I mean, obviously the victims want compensation. They lost their life savings. But Telford isn't just asking for money. He is asking for an integrity assessment.
An integrity assessment? That sounds introspective for a government department.
It is. He's basically asking the government to look in the mirror. He's asking the Attorney General's department to audit the morality of its own long-held position.
There's a question right at the end of the letter that really stuck with me. It felt like the mic drop moment of the whole thing.
I have it right here. It really does sum up this entire deep dive. He asks, and I'm quoting, "Can the Commonwealth fairly rely on undisclosed legislative distinctions to justify unequal treatment of victims of the same financial crime, where regulators possessed exclusive knowledge of the consequences and consumers did not?"
That is such a heavy question. It's not asking, is this legal? It's asking, is this fair?
Is it fair? Is it decent? It challenges the department to decide if simply being lawful is a high enough standard, or if ethical public administration requires something more.
It's a bold move. Dropping this on their desk today, February 5th, 2026, it puts the ball firmly in the Attorney General's court. They can't unread it now.
No, they have to decide. Are they going to double down on the technicality, the law says X, tough luck, or are they finally going to address the underlying failure of their duty of care?
So let's try to distill this for everyone listening. We've covered a lot of ground here, from 2004 regulatory shuffles to 2026 legal arguments. What are the key takeaways?
I think there are three. First, the tale of two victims. The simple, shocking realization that two people can face the exact same crime and get two wildly different outcomes based on paperwork they never even saw.
It just shatters that illusion of equal protection.
It does. Second is the power of omission. We always focus on what the government says, on press releases and new laws. This is a lesson in focusing on what they don't say.
Yeah.
That silence can be just as damaging as any action.
The danger is in the empty space where a warning should have been.
Perfectly put. And finally, the definition of maladministration itself. It's this crucial reminder that what is legal and what is fair are not always the same thing. You can follow your own rulebook and still fundamentally fail the people you exist to serve.
It really challenges how we think about bureaucracy. We see it as this boring, harmless, paper-pushing, oh, it's just admin. But this story shows that admin, or a lack of it, can destroy lives just as effectively as any thief.
It brings us right back to that fine print idea we started with. We have to be aware that there are layers of risk and protection that are basically invisible unless you know exactly where and how to look.
Which is a terrifying thought for the average person. You can't just Google, what is the government not telling me today?
You can't. And that's why this submission argues the onus has to be on the regulator. If you hold the exclusive knowledge, you hold the duty of care. You can't expect the citizen to be a forensic investigator.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with one final thought. We've talked about the knowledge asymmetry and the silence, but I keep coming back to that image of the regulator.
Which one?
The regulator watching this all unfold. If a regulator knows a trap exists in the system, a legislative black hole where total loss is guaranteed, and they stand by and watch citizens walk right into it without a single word of warning, are they merely an observer?
That is the ultimate question here.
Or, by maintaining that silence, do they become an accomplice to the outcome?
That is the question John Telford has placed on the desk of the Attorney General today. And the answer they give will tell us a lot about what integrity really means in our financial system.
We will definitely be watching to see how the department responds. This feels like a story that is far from over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
And to you, the listener, thanks for your time. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.